Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
Lionshare Bookkeeping believes the key to generating wealth is understanding where it comes from and where it needs to go. They provide bookkeeping and financial coaching exclusively to real estate investors, focusing on cash flow, strategy, and action. Go to lionsharebookkeeping.com/apartments to connect with them now. This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Bailey Kramer. Thanks for being on the show, Bailey.
Yeah, absolutely, Whitney. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited.
Bailey is a real estate investor based in Orlando, Florida. He's the host of the Real Estate Investing Made Simple podcast and also runs a multifamily meetup group. He aims to empower and inspire others to chase their dreams. Bailey, thank you again for your time this morning. Give the listeners a little more about who you are, your background in real estate, and let's jump into your superpower that's going to add value to the listeners.
All right, awesome. So again, my name is Bailey Kramer, based in Orlando, Florida. And my quick real estate story, I got started after reading the book that I'm sure all of your listeners have read, or at least most of them, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was my introduction to real estate. And that's what kicked it off. From there, I found Bigger Pockets, which is another huge resource that I know you talk a lot about on your show and a lot of your listeners know about. And from there, it was just networking, learning, and that networking piece was the biggest piece and helped me craft what I found to be my passion and really helped me launch into the real estate investing industry.
Nice. Well, I want to jump into that because it is so crucial in our business and in any business nearly, that you're networking in some way, whether it's with customers and other peers. So that way you're learning and growing all the time and connecting, because it was crucial to my early success as well, and just being very proactive about networking. And I think it's something we're always improving on, no matter how long you've been in the business. And so, just look forward to hearing what you did, Bailey. And let's just dive in there to give us a little background maybe before you started the networking component, but why, and how you did it and things like that.
Yeah. So, like I said, after reading that Rich Dad Poor Dad book, I went to Bigger Pockets. From Bigger Pockets, that's where I did a lot of my just consuming their podcasts, reading their books, and just getting a nice solid foundation. So from there, I said, okay, I learned about fix and flip. I learned about wholesale. You name the strategy, I probably read a book on it or heard a dozen podcasts on it. So I knew I'd decide to pick one area and go with it. And the way I decided was I listened to a webinar that talked about a plan for scaling a single family business, of going 1 this year, 2 the next year, 3 and it just wasn't clicking with me. So I decided, said to myself, there has to be another way. And that's when I found multifamily. So when I first learned about the scalability and all the amazing benefits of multifamily that you talk a lot about on your podcast, I said, okay, this is my focus. None of the wholesaling, none of the fix and flips. Let me focus my attention on multifamily. So the networking started literally the second I made that decision. I went to Bigger Pockets and looked up keyword multifamily for people's bio. And I would just message every single person that I possibly could. And I started a daily habit where I'd do 3 per day. And then I scaled that to 10 per day for the first few months. And that's what really kicked it off for me.
To do that and own Bigger Pockets. And what were you saying? How were you reaching out? And then, let's talk about how it was perceived as well.
Yeah. So, and I just want to mention my first messages, they were ugly. They were not well written at all, but that's not the main point of, obviously you want your messages to be as well written as possible. But for me at the time, I didn't know exactly what that message really looked like. So instead of procrastinating and trying to form the perfect message, I gave it my best shot. And sometimes I even look back at it and kind of laugh a little bit because I was just said some funny things in there. But yeah, I had this long paragraph saying, hey, my name is Bailey. I'm interested in multifamily. I would love to I said something about I would love to either have an internship with you or a mentorship with you before even knowing anything about that, which I wouldn't recommend going straight for the, hey, can I be your mentee? I don't recommend that. But I do want to say it worked in the way that people got back to me. And from there, I was able to realize and hone in my message. But that was my original message, what I said. And I kept it probably too long. I'd probably, going forward, and recommend other people, if you're reaching out to people randomly for the first time, introduce yourself, maybe tell them a little quick about you and how you found them, what you found interesting about them, and tell them that you're interested in learning more about them and maybe how you can add value to them as well.
What was your goal in doing this?
Yeah, so my goal was really just to connect with more people in strictly multifamily and learn from them. And I can tell you, I learned a ton from connecting with people in the multifamily space, because before that, I was just messaging people who kind of were doing a bunch of random things. I didn't have a specific focus. But once I picked multifamily operators or anybody in the multifamily space, and I had phone calls, I've had over 500 phone calls since the time that I began this. And the amount that I learned just from those conversations is invaluable.
Wow. So you would connect, and then you would also build up to that phone call, or
Yeah,
I guess you would ask them, hey, could we get on a call? And were all these people? So all these people are for the most part further ahead than you were at that time. And so what came out of those phone conversations?
Yeah. So a ton came out, and a few keys were, one, it was my first introduction to the hospitality and the kindness of the people in the multifamily industry. I realized that everyone's looking to add value. Everyone's looking to give back. And just, when you're starting out, it's a really good feeling that that you're going into an environment where it's a norm to give back. It's not everyone hoarding their secrets. People were pouring out their playbooks to me, and I was just shocked. But so that was the first thing. There was a ton more. One of the big things is people were telling me a lot about their either regrets or things that they wish they did differently. A lot of people say they don't have regrets, but things that if they could do differently, they would. And one of the biggest things I took away was a lot of people said, I did single family for 15 years, and then I learned about multifamily. And I heard that over and over and over again. People said, I didn't go big enough, fast enough, and they didn't have that mindset. They didn't know about it. So after hearing that literally hundreds of times, that was another automatic click that said, I don't want to make the same mistakes that these people made. I want to learn from their experiences. Before I even start anything, I was able to learn a ton and hone in my focus of multifamily.
Nice. It's neat that you noticed a pattern, and were able to take a lot from that as well. What about, something that stands out to me though, that you did this, obviously it's a massive time commitment, but just the commitment alone and being disciplined to do this every day. Tell me, let's dive into that a little bit though. You started with 3 a day, and then, you built up to 10 a day. What kind of time commitment was this, and when did you do this?
Yeah. So early on, this is when I had my morning routine from the book, The Miracle Morning, that you talk a lot about on the show, but it's just having those habits in the morning. So after I did my morning routine, I would go straight into my habits, and I had a whole checklist on my wall of things I would do. And it started 3 people a day. I knew that was super manageable. It wasn't a huge time commitment because it's copy and pasting a message, but customizing it slightly so it doesn't make them feel like you're just another one of their people that you're messaging. So as far as the upfront time commitment, it takes no more than 3 minutes to message 3 people a day, copy and paste a message, look at their bio, see where they're from, get a few key things about them, throw that in there, see how you can relate to that. And then yeah, you follow up with them, which again doesn't take too long. And then where you really connect and you really start to learn and the progress is made is when you hop on the phone with them. And it's kind of like when you go to an event, it's great and all, but the follow-up at the end is the biggest part to keep the relationship going, or in this case, really starting the relationship.
I love the commitment and the dedication, of sticking to it and doing it every day. And so let's give me some high points though that this brought you. What's been the success of doing this every day? And there's probably somebody that's listening saying, "No, wait a minute. Why would I do that every day?" But what did it do for you?
Yeah. So from this strategy, unintentionally, I found 2 mentors of mine already throughout this journey of mine. So one of the first few people I messaged on Bigger Pockets, just because he had the name multifamily in his bio, I kind of built a connection with him. And he actually was the one who recommended I go to a few webinars, a few meetups. I listened to a few podcasts. And just from those few things, from the podcast he recommended, the guest he had on became my first mentor and learned a ton from him. And then, a few months later down the road, I asked him if there's another meetup group, and he gave me who my current mentor, his meetup group. So that was like the most unexpected thing I got out of this. But what I realized was networking is the biggest piece to anything. You can have the most knowledge in the world, but if you don't know people and making it happen, then it's kind of irrelevant. So from building the network, another kind of effect that it had that I didn't even see coming till later on was I ended up starting a meetup group. And to start a meetup group, you need to have people there. So after I've been doing this for about a month or two, I already had a list built up of a few hundred people, of people that I messaged, talked to on the phone, that it wouldn't be a random message to invite them to my meetup. So that was a huge unintended benefit from just starting networking, building your list, building your relationships, because you never know. I didn't know in the beginning that I was going to start a meetup group. I thought maybe a year or two down the line, that'll be my wheelhouse. But when I figured out I could do this now, and I'm going to do this now, and you need people at your meetup group, that was another huge factor. And that networking plays the biggest piece in it.
Wow. So, how did this grow your network, in a short amount of time? I mean, what did it do just for your network or your investor base, or even just your, future mentors or mentees, or people that are doing the same thing and helping you in the future? But what did this do to your network?
Yeah. I mean, everything kind of plays off of each other, and it's all intended but unintended at the same time. So you don't exactly know what's going to come out of it, but when networking, only good things can really come out of it. So the greatest things that I've seen is the fact that a lot of people, especially in the multifamily industry, are connected. So the biggest thing is not having cold calls, for example. They're cold calls because you don't know them. You're calling them out of the blue. But when you have a network and you have people that can refer you, and I know that's a huge thing that people talk about on your podcast, you talk about, is having people refer you to certain property managers. So it's not this cold introduction. It's a warm, friendly introduction from someone that you know. And the way that you know them is from networking. And whether that's they know me from the meetup group or I know them from the meetup group, whether I just reach out to them from Bigger Pockets, it doesn't really matter exactly how you form the relationship. There's so many different strategies, but the fact that networking is such a crucial piece is the biggest takeaway, and will just open so many doors.
Nice. Now, my hat's off to you. I appreciate just your commitment that you took and the courage as well. Before you knew a lot about multifamily, before you were educated about it or all those things, you had to step out there. Even you talking about, the first messages, maybe have sounded horribly or, weren't written well, all those things. But, you still took action, and you wouldn't have got to the point you're at now if you hadn't have at least started. Right.
Absolutely.
So you had to just commit and jump in, and that's incredible. So, are you still doing this?
Yeah. So I actually pivoted my strategy a little bit. So I realized that in the beginning, I said bigger pockets was my main source. And then what I realized is a lot of the multifamily people, don't get me wrong, I'm on there still, but a lot of them aren't so focused on bigger pockets from my experience. So I started kind of transitioning to LinkedIn. And to quickly touch on my LinkedIn strategy and the strategy I use now is the first one is podcast. So if you listen to a podcast, you're consuming information for you, which is great. But another way to go above and beyond is reach out on LinkedIn to every single guest that you listen to on the podcast. So everyone gives their number out at the end, or their LinkedIn or their website or their email. And from my experience and from talking to a lot of people, most people don't reach out even when they give out their phone number, which is pretty crazy. So my new strategy is I listen to 2 podcasts a day. I'm usually listening to this podcast in the morning while making breakfast and another one later in the day. So I have 3 built-in benefits. I'm keeping my time occupied. I'm making breakfast. I have to eat, right? But I'm also consuming information, which only builds my knowledge. And then at the same time, I'm building my network from then reaching out. So that's one of the biggest things that I don't think a lot of people do that anyone can implement, which will really make a big difference.
Wow. This is incredible advice, and even some routine tips there. You're talking about, you're already eating breakfast. So why not listen to the podcast, learn a little something about that guest, and then reach out. And then you've probably got something personable that you can bring up, right? That person mentioned on the show. And that's going to go a long ways, I would imagine. And I agree. I give my number out and ways to contact me on like every interview that I do on other people's shows. And it's been many. And, I don't know, maybe I've had one person reach out or 2, something like that. Most people don't. And I don't know why either. I reached out on that note a few years ago when I started listening to podcasts, and I heard a guy talk about multifamily syndication. He gave out his number, and guess what? I called him, and I had a deal that I was working on at that time, and he couldn't talk that moment, but he called me back, later that night. And I was so impressed by that. And this individual now, everybody would know listening on this podcast, like he's a big name in this industry now. But I was so impressed, that he took the time to do that, not knowing me from anyone. So I feel like a lot of people would do that if you just take the time and the initiative like you have, Bailey, to make that happen. Any other tips about just how you're networking now? I know you said you've pivoted, which is it's neat. You've transitioned, and I think that happens. It has to happen. You have to improve your processes. But any other ways about how you've pivoted or improved this process to streamline it more?
Yeah, I would just say making it personal. Like I said about the cold introduction versus the warm introduction. When you say to someone, "Hey, I just listened to your podcast on so-and-so's podcast. Thank you so much for providing value on and specifying the topic. What were your key takeaways from the podcast?" When you make it specific and personal, the conversion rate, I don't have statistics on this, but it's night and day. It's completely different. And that's the biggest tip. Keep it personal, as warm as possible. Just remember, the cold calls are tough for a reason because they're blind. But if you keep it warm and just tell them how you heard about them, thanking them, that kind of thing, it'll go a long way.
Bailey, what's been the hardest part of this journey to syndication and real estate or multifamily for you?
I would say the hardest part is you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's just what you kind of go through with the learning process. But the way to kind of push through that is always be learning, always learning new things. And that's from networking, talking to people. That's from boot camps. That's from books, from podcasts, tons of different ways. And just always learning something new and always keeping that open mind is something that's allowed me to accept the fact that I don't know everything that I don't know. But that's okay because I'm going to keep learning and I'm going to discover and just keep learning every single day.
What do you predict will happen, say, in the next 6 to 12 months in the real estate market?
Yeah, that's going to be pretty crazy because we're in the midst of coronavirus right now. So that's a tough one. But I think right now it's tough because the prices are still high, cap rates are still compressed. How long can this go on for? I don't think too long, especially what's going on with the economy. There's a ton of factors that go into it, but hopefully within the next 6 to 12 months, we'll see cap rates decompress and hopefully the prices will come down as well and make it more of that buyer's market.
Bailey, one thing I believe successful entrepreneurs have is a lot of self-discipline, and you've already shown that through doing this one task on a daily basis for this long, showing the results of that. I think just consistent actions like that are what build up to big things. Most people wait on this like one big event, right? They're looking for this one thing that's going to like just do it for them, and it's very rare that happens. People look like an overnight success, but people don't see the 5 years of late nights and early mornings that this person has gone through to get there. For you, what has helped you to gain just a high level of self-discipline?
I would say talking to people and hearing their habits. Kind of success leaves clues. That's like the biggest little motto. So when you hear someone say something enough times, or you're on enough phone calls where the people are saying the same exact thing and they're in a place that you want to be in, you start to take note of that and it becomes part of your cycle. So the morning routine is something I've always been a morning person, but I didn't really have anything I was doing in the morning. So something I've been doing now is the miracle morning, the scribing, the reading, the exercising, affirmations, all that stuff that I know you talk about the miracle morning a lot too, but you kind of success leaves clues. You pick it up when you're looking to learn, the knowledge will come. And when you hear it enough times, after a certain amount of times, something will hit you and say, all right, it's time to not do something.
Yeah. Yeah. All these people that are look successful, they're some of the things they're doing are very similar, right? What are some of those daily habits that you're very disciplined about? I know it's one thing is this, but anything else, whether it's a morning routine or whether, like you mentioned, listen to the podcast, that's awesome. Anything else that that you are just so disciplined about that is helping you achieve success?
Yeah, I mean, I can't emphasize enough the morning routine, and I know it's mentioned so many times on the podcast and so many podcasts, but it's so important because for all of the meditation and all those types of reasons. But the way I look at it is starting your day off with a bang, with like a positive, with great energy. There's days, and don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect with any of these disciplines. There's days where I don't message 3 people or I don't do the miracle morning. I'm not perfect here, but the days that I don't do the morning routine is completely different than the days I do the morning routine. My energy in the morning, my focus, my discipline, it all changes. And for me, it starts with that morning routine, and that sets the framework for the rest of the day.
Nice. I couldn't agree more. So important. Your morning routine, how you approach the day. Even just setting this, this example of contacting these people every day. It's great stuff. So, Bailey, if you could go back and tell yourself something, 6, 8 months ago or a year ago, as far as getting started in all this and getting started in real estate, what would you tell yourself now?
Yeah, well, if I could talk to my future self before I even learned about the idea of real estate investing, I would have thrown some knowledge at me back in the high school days or maybe even before. But as far as starting the journey, I would say just do it. And it sounds so simple, but at the end of the day, networking with people, starting a meetup group, starting a podcast, all these things, the worst thing that could happen is someone says no, or there's really nothing that bad that can come out of it. So stuff like that when you're first starting out, just kind of knowing worst case scenario, someone doesn't answer the phone. That's all right. You can just hang up and call somebody else. When you're starting a meetup group, oh no, if you don't have 100 people at your first meetup, which isn't even expected in the first place, but even if you only have a few people, that's okay. You have to start somewhere. And that's what I would tell myself. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah, just go ahead and expect many no's before you get to a yes, and then it's not a surprise, right?
Yeah,
So,
100%.
So what's a way you've recently improved your business that we could apply to ours?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest ways that I've improved everything that I'm doing and pinpointing on my podcast and a bunch of other things is using automation. So I hear a lot of people talk about virtual assistants, which is awesome. And I actually have like really quick, the three kind of pillars. You can either do everything yourself, which is okay. You can send it out to a VA or an employee, and that's good. But the best thing that I found is automation, and that's through tools like Zapier. And it's even better than a VA, not only for the cost benefit, but they're working the automation's working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So whether that's sending out emails, I have a lot of automations for my podcast process, which I'm sure you do as well. And the automations, I think, are what's really overlooked. People talk a lot about virtual assistants, which are amazing, and I have those as well. But the automations are something that's key that I don't think a lot of people know about. So Zapier automations is definitely something I suggest people look into.
Can you give a couple more examples of what you've automated? And it doesn't have to be podcast related, but even like you mentioned, emails. Well, what have you automated around email through something like Zapier?
Yeah. So with my meetup group, I of course use MailChimp. I know a lot of people use ActiveCampaign, but there's a lot of different automations you can do with something like Zapier. So right now, a few of the zaps they're called that I have set up are when someone signs up for the meetup, it puts all their information in a nice spreadsheet. And then I have automations that text them, that emails them. And there's some things that you could do with just using straight ActiveCampaign or MailChimp. But there's certain things that you can use with Zapier or other automation tools that'll just take the data that you already have and organize it in a specific way. So for example, I've hosted about 7 meetups so far once a month. So I automate it. So I have one spreadsheet called Bailey's Meetup, and each little tab I have the different meetups, and automatically the information comes in, and I can set different automations with reminders. I can set automations with texting them and a lot of things like that, which have been huge.
Nice. No, it's a great tip. I love automation stuff myself and how to automate the process so it takes less workload, right? And it's done more professionally at times as well. No, I love that. Appreciate you sharing that. What's your best source for meeting new investors right now?
Yeah, I would say meetup groups are really big, and I host a podcast as well. So that's another way through hosting the podcast and then kind of promoting it on social media. So the free tools, right? Social media and meetup groups, they're completely free to attend. Tons of great people there, and just kind of building that network, like I've been emphasizing, has been the best way for me.
What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
I would say the number one thing that's contributed to my success is just my ability to go for it and just start. There's a lot of things that, and this is all a learning process as well. In the beginning, I wasn't just perfect going for it, but after time, you develop that mentality that you can do it. You build up the self-confidence, and things flow a lot easier. I'm able to kind of act quicker and have more confidence doing so, just because I have that. It's all in the mindset. So having that mindset's helped me kind of push forward faster.
That's awesome. You have to commit. You have to have a little courage before you're going to have the education or the confidence, right? You got to commit, and you've done that. Grateful for sharing your story, Bailey. It's incredible. I love hearing stories of just taking action, being very consistent and dedicated, being self-disciplined, which you have expressed and shown how that has worked for you. 3 to 10 connections a day, then phone calls following up, and increasing your network very quickly. And that didn't take a podcast, or a thought leadership platform. You did that a different way and showed really a different way to make that happen. So congratulations to you. Tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So best way you can get in contact with me, either LinkedIn, or you can check out my website, baileykramer.com. But yeah, LinkedIn, website. Also, I have a podcast, Real Estate Investing Made Simple. You can check me out there. But please reach out. I know we talked about a lot on this podcast. I'm open to reach out and happy to have the conversations.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.